Hello?
Hi, Mark?
Yeah, Ben.
Yes, hi. Good morning.
How are you?
I'm well. Yourself?
Are you in New Jersey, or is that just where your phone is?
I live in Philadelphia now, but I grew up in New Jersey.
Cool. How's Philadelphia? How long you been there for?
I love it. I have no plans of leaving. I've been here since 2008. I was in South Philly for 15 years, and then I just moved to Center City last year, and it's been a blast. A little bit more expensive, but definitely worth the quality of life increase.
Cool. One of my nephews went to school there.
Oh yeah, and, which school?
He went to is it Penn that's there?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where he went. Yeah, he loved it. Had a really great time.
Nice. Yeah. I know at least one person who went there. And you live in Austin still, if I'm not mistaken?
Yep.
Okay.
I've been here since I think like 2003, maybe.
Oh, okay. So you must like it enough.
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's been, the past 20 years here have just been this kind of crazy change. I'm sure you hear about it or whatever. It's one of those exploding kind of places, you know.
Right. I think I saw in an interview that was published online. It was like there's like 1,000 people moving to Austin every day or something you said along those lines.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, you know. And then I think also there's been kind of just an exodus from other places. You know, it's got more of a less regulated approach to, you know, extremely large businesses. So, I mean, it's kind of bribery in a way, the tax incentives they give them and stuff. But, you know, like Tesla's here now.
Okay. Is there like a big Amazon warehouse?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a few of them. And then I think it's Samsung is building the biggest chip factory in the United States here, just outside of Austin anyway.
Well, yeah, everything I've heard about Austin, aside from what you just told me, is that it's like really cool and kind of a cultural... Yeah, it's kind of changing a lot. I think a lot of people here are kind of bringing whatever they're bringing with them, but it used to be more or less kind of provincial, you know. Like right. I remember coming here like in the 90s and just going, why is this even a thing? You know, basically the two things that were here were the Texas seat of government, it's the Texas Capitol, and then also UT. And, you know, so that was basically it. Of course, UT had a lot of math and physics and you know, people like that, right. As well as a sort of, you know, athletic program or whatever. But, yeah, Austin's kind of done, I think it's always been kind of like the sort of ugly stepchild city in Texas, apart from El Paso, of course, but... and San Antonio. So now it's kind of seems like it wants to kind of get up into Houston and Dallas land. That's interesting. I can draw a parallel to Philadelphia. We are kind of like I think considered the mean kind of lower dignity city of the East Coast, but yet a lot of people enjoy it when they come visit, and yeah, I mean, I hope the rent stays lower than New York City, but yeah, that's interesting what you have to say about Austin.
Yeah, maybe a lot of people are moving there from New York because New York's just become kind of unmanageable in a lot of ways. You know?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, no, we could talk about that forever.
Yeah. I'm happy that you're doing this. That you allotted a generous amount of time to talk. don't want to take away too much from the July 4th holiday, but I'm happy to be doing this for sure. Yeah, I've got a bunch of questions. It's a little bit ambitious, so, whatever we do, and I'm cool with that.
Sure.
You were born in London and you grew up in El Paso, Texas, eventually moving back, obviously. But you went to school at the California Institute of the Arts, and I was just curious what prompted that decision. Why did you choose that particular school?
It's sort of a weird kind of story how I got there, but also just to correct a little bit, I didn't go directly to El Paso from the UK. It's like I lived in my stepfather was in the military, so I lived in Florida and Germany also.
Okay, yeah, I remember seeing something like that. So yeah,
it's not super important, but it sounds slightly less exotic than going straight from the UK to El Paso. But anyway, yeah, I was going to as far as the CalArts thing's concerned, I ended up going to a boarding school in Arizona from about a year and a half of my high school years, because I was a terrible and completely truant student in El Paso. Like, I would pretend like I was going to school in the morning, and then I would just go over to my friend's house, and we'd basically just sit around his place playing music. He was actually the drummer on The Silent Treatment. And
that's what I was going to guess.
But anyway, so from my truancy was finally discovered, and so I was basically told that I was going to be sent to a place where I had to go to school.
Right.
And so that's what happened, and I ended up at this place called Verde Valley School in Sedona, and it was this really small, kind of I guess what they call a prep school now, but it was sort of an alternative education place. But I really thrived there, and was kind of challenged. And one of the things about public school was it was super boring to me. But anyway, there was a great music teacher at this school, and you could, if you came up with a plan for inventing a class for yourself, you could do that, as long as the teacher signed off on it. So the music teacher there was this really cool woman who was a pianist, aspiring kind of classical pianist, and she ended up being the music teacher there. And I told her I was really interested in learning how to write music, and this is like the very sort of dawning of my serious music inclinations. And we had a conversation about what kind of music I liked and the sort of stuff I wanted to write. And she kind of reined in my ambitions to want to write symphonies and stuff, and said, okay, you're going to have to learn about harmony and the way that's constructed. And anyway, so she agreed to kind of help me learn how to write music. She was not really a composer herself, but she knew all the nuts and bolts about it. And so that's really where I started to learn about that whole thing. And then I kind of continued my misbehavior socially in a few ways, and ended up getting kicked out of that school at the end of my junior year. And so she had already applied to, previous to getting kicked out, she had told me about CalArts and how she was going to be leaving Verde Valley School to go become a piano major at CalArts outside of LA. And she knew that I was really kind of miserable at Verde Valley and said, hey, they have this kind of contingency where they will accept students as long as you've completed your junior year for applying to their music school there, as long as you get a GED. And she said, I think your writing's getting to the point where, it seems like there might be something promising there, so why don't you go ahead and apply to CalArts and just see what comes of it. You can, she said, I'll help you go through the application process. And, that was a really cool thing and kind of gave me a vision of possibly a way out of having to go back to school there and do another year there and complete my senior year and graduate from high school there.
Oh, so you could graduate a year early?
No, you could not graduate a year early.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Like from the high school, you still had to complete your senior year to get a high school diploma.
I'm curious what if you could remember what you did to get yourself kicked out.
Yeah, it was a really weird thing because it's highly peripheral, to this conversation, not really interesting. They had a no alcohol policy, which, basically everybody at the entire school ignored.
Okay. Yeah.
But it was just kind of like, don't be blatant about your alcohol use. So, I just got caught with another student purchasing alcohol in the town.
Okay.
And, they had kind of had a sort of, turn the other way policy as long as you weren't being too flagrant about what you were doing. And I just happened to go with a friend of mine to the liquor store in town, and he would always be buying alcohol, and I just happened to be with him, and a teacher just happened to walk in, to buy a bottle of wine. And so this was considered being flagrant. It was like, here's a teacher, and you've got a bunch of liquor on the counter.
Right.
So I was more or less kind of, but classes had already ended at that point. There was like another week of just kind of post-academic activities like graduation and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And so, I was just kind of scapegoated, and they were just like, yeah, we can't look the other way with this, and you're going to have to leave. And anyway, so, and then about a month later, they sent me a letter saying I was invited back.
Oh, okay. Now I understand. Yeah.
Because basically I had like a perfect record and I was a really good student.
Okay.
So like we understand what happened. We're sorry about this whole thing and we want to start fresh. And you're invited back and we'd love to have you back. And I was like, I'm not going back. But anyway.
The good part of that is that you went to this school, and from what I understand, you learned from some notable musicians, John Cage, Morton Subotnick. Just curious if you had anyone in particular who influenced you in your direction forward from there the most, or anybody that stood out.
It's kind of difficult to pick one person because it was like this really amazing sweet spot for aging American avant-garde composers to just blow through this place. It was like completely a destination place, along with like Mill College up in the Bay Area. There was kind of a circuit that all these guys did. Subotnick was actually on the staff, and I think he was the dean of the music school when I was there.
That's so cool.
But basically all of these guys, like Lou Harrison, Jacob Druckmann, Morton Feldman, Aaron Copland, incredibly. All these guys were just, CalArts was just on the circuit for these guys to go and be a composer in residence for a week or two. And you could just sign up and have classes with them and attend, they'd be doing seminars for a couple of weeks. And if you were in the composition program, you'd just be like, this is what we're doing this week. We're going to listen to Aaron Copland speak, So it was pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, I mean, I did manage to have a private lesson with Morton Feldman. And that was super memorable in a lot of ways. And weirdly, Morton Subotnick was kind of like, I was automatically just put into his composition class because if you were a composer, he was just the guy teaching the main composition class, And so every week I was having classes with him, so it didn't seem out of the ordinary to me. He was like a staff member. But he had a very sort of allegorical, metaphorical way of writing, which was really interesting. He wasn't really hardcore on technique. It was more sort of poetical and impressionistic. And that was I was too young to get my head around any of this.
Right, yeah.
And then at the same time, there was really serious harmony technique and serial techniques being taught there. And so I was taking all this stuff, and I really got alienated and sort of turned off by the way that the American avant-garde school was, what was being pushed at the time. It was like the sort of the beginnings of kind of impressing serious academia upon artists.
Okay.
Like the way that like fine artists now, fine visual artists are basically not even considered unless they have like the correct MFA from the correct place.
I see. Yeah.
So there was a big stress on like serial techniques and stuff like that, and that was really alienating to me because I was just kind of really wanting to. I was coming from like an expressionist and impressionistic point of view for writing music. I loved things like Stravinsky and Ravel and stuff like that, and I was just like, what? You like this stuff? And so I was interested in the nuts and bolts of how that stuff worked, and that really wasn't available. There was all this kind of postmodernism and serial technique stuff being pushed, which to me was fascinating more on like a mathematical level than anything else. But I also just really kind of rebelled against having to explain every single thing I was doing musically,
Yeah.
So I found myself getting kind of alienated with the composition program because obviously, weirdly, that was kind of a top-down sort of platform. We're going to pump out a bunch of postmodernist, serially obsessed people. And weirdly, I'm not sure exactly where that came from because Subotnick, as the dean of the school, was not really pushing those ideas in his own class. So there was a little bit of a schizophrenic thing happening. And I mean, I went there when I was 17, so I was just kind of a babbling idiot as far as I was concerned in my own mind with all this stuff that other people were doing, And anyway, Morton Subotnick was really impressionable to me as at that age, and I only had one lesson with him, and he was just this kind of rude New York guy who seemed like he should have been, in real estate or something. And was just kind of constantly eyeing any kind of female within 50 feet.
Oh, my. Okay.
And kind of had but not in a salacious way, just like, I mean, I'm giving away my age now, but just like in an old school, like, hey, what are you doing?
Like
they had this big sort of New York accent and this kind of black, greasy hair and these super thick glasses. And so...
so kind of like a harmless flirter that, didn't really bother too many people.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't gropey, and he wouldn't make it now just because of his ideation and the time that he came from. But anyway, he was just kind of like, what the hell are you doing with all these notes? And, I don't even, come back and see me when you're 35. And he was just kind of completely dismissive, and I felt really, I liked his music. I thought it was really just, I thought this would be the kind of music that if you went to like another galaxy, they'd be listening to on whatever their radios would be,
Right. That's kind of how I feel. It's kind of cool to get this inside knowledge of his persona. I am curious around when you met Lori Black. I think I saw somewhere 1979, which strikes me as around the time you were at the school. Mm-hmm. So how did you meet, and what was it like dating Shirley Temple's daughter?
Lori was going to CalArts. And she was in the photography department.
Okay.
She was there as a photo major. And I think she told me that she actually went to Evergreen for a couple of semesters, if you know where that is, up in, it's in Washington State. It's
okay.
Like a liberal arts college. They've become notorious because of this whole thing with Brett Weinstein. You know who that guy is?
Brett Weinstein? No, I don't.
He's like a biology professor, basically.
Okay.
But anyway, him and his wife were professors at Evergreen, and they had all this weird diversity crap happen. And basically were saying they got like all of the faculty and said, okay, you need to sign a document basically saying that you are this kind of person and you're not this kind of person. That's like the gist of it. And he said, I'm not doing that. This is ridiculous. It's draconian, and it's just against everything this particular place is espoused to stand for.
Right.
So anyway, that's another side point. But anyway, Lori went there this is something that happened like in the 2000s. She went there, I think before she went to CalArts, she was trying to do photography up there. It didn't work out for her.
I think this rings a bell. Did Calvin Johnson go to that school? Do you happen to know? I read a chapter in Our Band Can Be Your Life about Beat Happening, and I know it's not near Olympia.
Yes.
Oh, then I'm almost certain. Very, very liberal kind of. I mean this in the best way possible. Hippy dippy kind of school.
Yeah, it's like one of those early places. Like I think it aspired to be kind of like Mills College, or something like that.
Okay.
But if you have time, you should definitely just look up Evergreen, and you'll read the whole thing about Brett Weinstein and all that stuff, and that is much later, but it's an interesting just dive into how that whole thing ends up just kind of eating itself. You know what I mean? Like it just went so far the other way that it turned into everything that it hated.
That sucks.
But anyway, yeah, so Lori ended up at CalArts, and I'm not even sure how long she'd been there for, maybe possibly a couple of semesters before me. But we had a mutual friend. I lived in the dorm. I had a friend who was in the graphics. He was in the art school, and he was an aspiring graphic designer. And so he was a friend of Lori's. And So I met Lori through him. She would come over and hang out at his room, and they'd be listening to music. There was like a little gang of, just kind of a clique of people in a few different schools, like the theater school, the art school, music school, whatever. And this guy, Michael was his name, just happened to live across the hall from me. And so that's how I met Lori. And I met her, I think, the end of my first semester, second semester at CalArts.
Oh, okay, so fairly early then.
Yeah, so that's how I met her, and she was just a casual friend, and he kind of said, yeah, that's Shirley Temple's daughter. And I went, oh, whatever. There were a few other children of, so-called famous people there. I think Sam Peckinpah's daughter was going there at the time, and a few other people, sort of like Johnny Carson's son, I think, went there. It's like a classical guitar player. So but I mean, these were just people you'd see them, and somebody would say something about them, and it was just like, they don't, it's not like they have wings or something.
Right, yeah.
They're just regular people, but anyway, yeah, so I met Lori just a few times right before the end of the year, I think, and kind of remembered her as being a, really just cute little vivacious person with a super hilarious sense of humor who just said whatever she wanted to say, and it was often extremely hilarious and contentious. And next year we just, kind of, I think the first time we ever spent any time alone together was she asked me for a ride to go pick up her car, which was worked on or something. And we just started seeing each other after that, and that's kind of how that whole thing got going.
And then from what I understand, you taught her to play bass. And in one of your videos, you nicknamed her the godmother of sludge. So if you taught her to play music, does that make you the professor of sludge?
I hope not. I mean, don't blame all that on me. But I mean, I'll take it. Wow, yeah, okay, that's an interesting lineage, But yeah, she was always. I mean, Lori had played the piano since she was a little kid, and basically, this is a good Shirley story. Lori grew up playing on a Steinway that Steinway built for her mother.
Oh,
so,
wow. Cool.
They had it in the front room. I don't know who owns it now. It was sold at like a big auction. But yeah, Steinway built a baby grand for Shirley, and it had like a, plaque on the inside and everything. So yeah, Lori grew up playing the piano and was a huge music fan, and growing up in the Bay Area saw all kinds of amazing things. There's a very famous picture of Lori and her mom with the Beatles.
Oh, wow.
A show, you can Google that, you'll see it. Lori's like 8 or 9 years old, and she's sitting like maybe on Ringo's lap, and there's like John and Paul and her mom. It's like a ridiculous photo.
I'm probably going to Google that like right after this.
And then allegedly her dad, or not allegedly, Lori tells me this story about how her dad had a camera and was back there taking a whole bunch of pictures. Not like a big camera, just like a Kodak Instamatic or something. And somebody in the Beatles entourage made him open the camera, take the film out, and give it to him. So
wow.
that's kind of lame. It's like, you're our guest, and it's like, give me all the photos you just took.
Yeah, geez.
And then also just ballsy to do it to Lori's dad. If you you Google Lori's dad, I mean, that's like a whole other thing. You think?
Yeah, I'm sure. So you were in a band together, Clown Alley. I listened to the album last night for the first time. It was just a YouTube stream. That's the best I could do. So there were like ads throughout, but I was really into it. It kind of reminded me of Venom, like the production on those early Venom albums. Really kind of crusty but heavy, like Venom meets Black Flag or something. And I'm really stoked on it. I think a lot more people should hear it. And you produced that along with a number of other albums with your Alchemy label. But I was curious, do you have any one memory that stands out as quintessentially Clown Alley? You know, there's so little information out there, so I thought I'd give you one question about that band.
Well, I mean, it's yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of really weird ones, that's for sure. But what a lot of people probably don't know is the very first version of Clown Alley was 3 girls and me.
Oh.
And so that Clown Alley never did any recording or anything, but so there was this lead singer, her name was Maxine, and then the drummer, I think, was a friend of Maxine, and her name was Becky, and Becky actually became the drummer in the Lunatics.
Oh, well, I've heard of them.
Yeah. So, so we just found these people through, I don't even know what we used in the Bay Area, but it was the equivalent of like, you know, these free ads papers that there used to be in the 70s and 80s. Like there was, in LA, it was called the Recycler, and it was just this holdover newspaper that came out for free, and it was just filled with nothing but stuff for sale. I guess it would be the equivalent of what, you know, like Facebook Marketplace or eBay or something like that. And then also there was like big community sections where there was the musicians wanted thing was a huge section, or musicians available. And so countless bands kind of got together and fell apart by this particular paper. And I can't remember what the one in the Bay Area was, but so we found the singer Maxine, and she was kind of butch and had like a kind of a cool heavy voice. And then we found Becky, and she was kind of butch also, but playing early Clown Alley music, she just had no stamina. So basically, she could play about halfway through a song, and then she had to stop and have a breather. And then, you know, but,
sounds like me.
But when we first started playing out, the 3 of us, and from the get-go, Lori was always complaining that they were hitting on her.
Really?
She was basically like, after, I don't think that version lasted very long, like it might have lasted 6 or 7 months, but anyway, you know, it just got to the point very quickly with Lori where she was like, I'm burned on these fucking dykes hitting. And she'd say it exactly like that, not in front of them, of course, but
right.
Lori had a pretty salty time, you know, and it was really hilarious. I mean, she could just make me just, you know, spit out what was ever in my mouth with a comment, you know. And that's, her mother had not necessarily that saltiness, but definitely that kind of humor also.
That's cool.
I remember, you know, a review of one of the early reviews of Clown Alley playing a show in Maximum Rock and Roll, if you know what that was.
Oh, again, it's like something I've heard about, but was not really privy to in my lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably too young for it, but this is like ancient history stuff. This is like 80s.
That's
punk rock war, you know. Bands probably once again got together and fell apart through that magazine. But they wrote a review of a Clown Alley gig and said this band would be great if they would get rid of that guitar player.
Oh, meaning you?
Yeah, meaning me, and of course I was writing all the songs and making it sound the way that it did. You know?
That seems silly to me because, you know, I mean, just from listening to the album, your guitar playing is sick. I don't know.
Well, thanks, but it's just funny because I mean that was kind of the way that, you know, things worked in San Francisco. If you had an all-girl band, it was like all the doors were open to you, you know.
I see. Yeah.
And actually, I think Lori and I even had a conversation about, like, maybe we could find a girl guitar player. Still, I could do like a Brian Wilson thing, you know. I could just like write all the songs. You know.
So yeah, might as well segue into one of my personal favorite chapters of researching for this interview, the Alchemy Records formation in the mid-'80s with Victor Hayden, a.k.a. the Mascara Snake from Captain Beefheart's Magic Band. I'm not going to ask you too much because you do an awesome YouTube video about Victor in particular, on his eccentricities, some great stories. I fully recommend to anybody who will hear this interview to check out not just that video, but your whole YouTube channel is great. So I guess my one question concerning Alchemy was, what was your mission? What was the driving force, the impetus behind the label, and how did you want Alchemy to be known?
Well, I mean, I think Victor and I were on the same page up until we were just on, like, in different libraries, basically.
Right.
But I mean, he was a huge just fan of what was going on at the time in the Bay Area. There was a lot of really diverse sort of sounds coming out of, you know, people were not as influenced by each other. There were all these little pockets of people doing interesting stuff, and he was just running around going, I would run into him at shows, and he was like, wow, he'd always liked the band that I would thought was the best. And so we had that in common, and he had some kind of disposable income for wanting to realize, I don't think he was particularly ambitious as like wanting to have a record label or whatever, but he was just, from a fan point of view, he was like, more people need to hear this.
Right,
you know,
okay.
Maybe I can be part of helping people hear this. It was kind of a altruistic thing, a genuine altruism. He wasn't like, I can make money off of this. He was basically, why don't you have a record out? You know, that's one of the first things he said to me at a Clown Alley gig. You know,
okay.
Like, I don't have any money to make a record. And so, you know, through our conversations, I kind of learned how to sort of produce and engineer down in Los Angeles when I was living down there with Lori, and you know, my first kind of halting steps towards figuring out how to do it happened there. And so I was always a fan of great recording, great production. I still am. And talking to Victor, having conversations with him, I said, you know, one of the things that I don't like about a lot of this music is how terrible it sounds. Mm-hmm. You know, how it's just kind of, we're going to make the whole record in a day, and we're going to do it with people who are just, you know, wanting to party and have a band record at their place, or just don't really know what they're doing.
Right.
And I mean, doing what you're doing is a sliding scale, right? Because, I mean, you know, there's been some sort of amateurish attempts at making records that have turned out really well.
Right.
You know? But I was more about, like, here's not really draconian about where you put the mic and the kind of mic you use, but just spending more time in pre-production and making sure people are together and doing it the best possible way you can do it for the cheapest amount of money, and having the best sounding thing that you can get. Just spending a little more time on the front end, I think, with the end result in mind, instead of just kind of blowing through it and then trying to fix stuff later on.
So you brought like a professionalism to that kind of off-the-cuff punk attitude, is what I might sum up from this, which is,
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that was like kind of a weird thing to balance during that time too, because I mean, the irony, of course, is that with all of those kind of trends of that nature, kind of anarchic, rebellious type of stuff, I mean, it trickles all the way down to like what kind of guitar and what kind of amp do you have, so there was prejudices that existed throughout all of that, where like, oh, you're doing this,
right,
so you're snob or whatever, and for me, I've just always been a fan of things that sound good.
Right.
That's something that transcends snobbery to me. I mean, this is all kind of like, you don't have the right kind of thing on your leather jacket, then, we can't hang with you. It's just weirdness that's always happened, even in the 60s and the 50s. And you just have to think about like the mods versus the rockers in the early 60s.
Right.
It's more click-based than anything else. But I mean, in a nutshell, that's what it is. It's just trying to get the best possible result for the least amount of money, and maybe possibly open people's ears to like, wow, it's not actually that bad to want to make your drums sound like John Bonham. It's not a bad thing,
Big sounding, like almost huge sounding, drums and guitars. It's I think my complaint about a lot of the 80s punk that I've heard is that it's a little thin, and it kind of just like, it's very like a narrow range that hits my ears, whereas your recordings, especially Gluey Porch Treatments, I did hear that one Neurosis album once or twice, and now Clown Alley, they kind of all share this similar DNA of more like thickness meets, punk, which was different from a lot of the 80s recordings that I've heard.
Yeah, they're very, they all sound kind of different, and I tried to just sort of bring an environment that kind of reflected what the band was doing, but it was, absolutely a challenging thing to do, but I think a lot of those records in the 80s, just because of I can't necessarily blame, the engineering staff or the bands or whatever else, but I mean, a lot of times and Ozma is like, I spoke about this in the Ozma video I made, when you go into places and they're not set up, quote, properly,
right,
to be more or less flat. It's really hard to understand what you're listening to, and we didn't have like super frequency analyzers and stuff back then. I mean,
right,
they probably did at like really, really nice studios, but if you went into, most kind of professional studios back then were 2-inch 24-track machine studios, and they didn't necessarily have hyper what's the word I'm looking for, just technical monitoring situation.
Yeah.
So you were just kind of like going, okay, I think it's really the best thing you could do would be record everything flat, but that's before I learned about flat recording from Joe Barisi, so okay. I didn't know about that, I was just kind of trying to like put the puzzle together, you know.
Now, is this all pre-digital audio workstation?
This is like, I mean, really, that didn't come in until the mid-90s.
Okay, I needed to get my timeline right.
Yeah, until it was affordable. Like digital recording actually came in the early 1980s. Incredible.
Right. Okay.
It became sort of viable. You know, like in the mid 80s. Like we were able to make what's called PCM safeties of digital safeties of like masters in the mid 80s, and that was affordable because you could do it on like a Betamax or a VHS tape.
Okay.
That's where it went. But yeah, this is like, I think the first time that stuff got on my radar was when Melvins were doing Stoner Witch at A&M. And that's when I realized the capability of it. You know, there was a guy there who was basically replacing 10,000, like, I don't know, cymbal hits on like a Metallica live record, you know, at that studio at the time.
Okay.
And he was like, I live in this room with this thing, and this is what I'm doing.
So just kind of tweaking every little sound on this Metallica album, like cymbals, to make it sound.
Well, it was like a live thing.
Okay.
They wanted to put out this giant box that was like live. They played 7 gigs in Mexico, and it was going to have like every gig on it. And there was something where like the sync was off or something. I don't know exactly what it was, but he was like, yeah, I'm correcting like 10,000 cymbal hits like on all these gigs.
Whereas the production you were doing was a lot more by feel, kind of, it sounds like.
You mean like Stoner Witch?
Well, I guess more like Louis Porch treatments and Ozma just strike me.
Yeah, that was peripheral. Yeah, I mean in those days it was basically, okay, here's the dates that we're going to go and record. You practice your song arrangements or whatever. Send me a tape. I may have some suggestions. I don't know. It was literally send me a cassette. So I know what I was looking forward to trying to work with in the studio, and then get in there and just make slight adjustments. Everything's going down live. I mean, it was Melvin's records. I think the only thing that was overdubbed was probably vocals and maybe some really small amounts of guitar, but that was basically hit record. And once again, put a couple of days into getting the sound. Yeah. You know, at least as much time was put into getting the sound as recording. So, you know,
that's so
like a lot of other stuff at the time was basically, come on in, we'll set up, we get levels, and we're ready to go.
Yeah. Just, you know, workmanship, live in the studio stuff. That's more what I gravitate towards in general. If I know anything about albums, I would prefer them.
All the greatest stuff just has like a live core at the middle of it, you know, for the foundation of it. And I mean, like that first, a good example is, and a weird example is the Knack album. You remember that band, the Knack?
Oh, the Knack. My Sharona?
My Sharona.
Right. Yeah, I have that record. I got it for free.
Well, listen to that record again, and think to yourself, they're playing this live in the studio.
Wow, that really?
Record, I think maybe the vocals were overdubbed, but that's it. The whole record is the band playing live.
That's impressive, actually.
It's really, really impressive. And I actually got to see the Knack, like in 2002. They played at some weird kind of fairground in El Paso or something. And I was a fan of that album, as actually Buzz and Dale were huge fans of that album.
That seems on brand for their music tastes.
But yeah, I saw them and they played it exactly the same way. It was the original band, and it was like, wow, this is insane. They were really good.
So, yeah, I mean, inevitably, we got to talk about the Melvins here. The Mascara Snake recruited the Melvins to record gluey portrait treatments with you. I got to know, what was your first impression of the Melvins as they came down from Aberdeen to San Fran?
Yeah, I was trying to. You mean like before they actually moved to San Francisco?
Right. They only came down to record gluey porch treatments, and I think they stayed with the Mascara Snake overnight or while recording.
They had come down before. Like, I'm trying to remember if they came down once or twice, and I think I saw them at this place, New Method, which was kind of like a communal, sort of underground, off the books punk rock place in the East Bay. And I'm not sure if I ever saw them when they came down the first time just to play, or the second time. I think the first time I actually saw them was when I was in the studio recording them, you know. But Victor had their, I think it's called 6 Songs or something.
Right.
Record.
Wow, that's going to be worth something now.
And so anyway, he'd gone up to Seattle and seen them. Or I think he saw them at New Method, and then he went up to Seattle because he had friends up there, some kind of connections up there, and saw them. And then when he came back, he was really, his enthusiasm for them had kind of jumped up a level. And this is right when Alchemy had just gotten going. And he was going, we need to do this band, because whatever, he gave me the record, and I kind of went, oh, okay. And to me, it sounded like a combination of slowed down Black Sabbath and Black Flag.
Right.
You know, kind of the Flag Sabbath type thing. I liked it though, and I thought it had some avant-garde stuff going on in it, so that really resonated with me, and I was going, I think this could be cool, and it was really just more intuitive once again than anything else. I think that's the main thing that Victor and I both had going for us, and it's sort of like the guys that started all the big labels and those big, like, Warner Brothers and Atlantic, like Mo Austin and Ahmet Erdogan. It's like you read early interviews with them, and they're just kind of like, yeah, I just felt, I'm not comparing myself to those people, but just as far as the whole, like, I had a feeling like this would be pretty good, and they got people like John Hammond involved who were just like, yeah, this feels like, this sounds pretty good. I mean, it's basically on that level, it's just completely intuitive, and they ended up creating great things. And once again, not to compare, but that intuitive thing turns out to be right more often than not. And Melvins are a great example of that. Right.
When I listen to gluey porch treatments, it's like I could probably convince somebody else in the room that the album came out yesterday. It's the kind of rock music that stands out as unique, and I think that's the more timeless stuff that transcends time. So yeah,
I think it's one of those things too where, like I was saying, back then there was less connectivity, so between people and scenes or whatever, so you couldn't find out what somebody was doing out in, Aberdeen, Washington, for example.
Right.
Nobody knew what the hell anybody was doing out there,
So it's almost like outsider art everywhere.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that's why there's so much great art and music and whatever, because it was all effectively outsider at one point.
Yeah. So, you do production work with the Melvins, then you do sound, and eventually they ask you to join in 1993. So, My question for you is, what did you bring to the table as a bassist that was unique from past bassists like Laurie Black or Joe Preston?
Let's not forget Matt.
Yes, Matt Lukin.
Really I think the one thing that makes me stand out amongst all of bass players is I'm not a bass player.
Right, okay.
So that's the starting point. I mean, I've always loved the bass. I'm actually about to do a YouTube video about 5 bass players that have influenced me.
I think you're playing on Buck Owens in particular on Stag would indicate otherwise. That you are indeed a bass player.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't like everybody that I admire. I don't consider myself anywhere near the kind of pantheon of people who still can continue to inspire me. But I think, first of all, I just had this, sense of music that was completely, just vastly more expansive than any of the prior people who played bass. And then, I always thought that just playing along with what the guitar player is doing, especially like in a 3-piece band, is just kind of
boring.
It is boring. And it's like, why wouldn't you just, have an octave pedal and like another set of amps, if that's what you're going to do.
Right. Yeah.
But, I was always interested, and the thing with the Melvins is like we've got 2 just immense musical entities happening in a limited space, and so you have really no choice but to carve out space for yourself, So what I did was I always looked at what was going on as a point of departure. Like I tried to think contrapunctually about how can I make this bigger. It seems like a non sequitur really with them. Everything is already like enormously big. It's sort of the thing where you're just going, everybody's in the recording studio going, everything needs to be bigger.
Right, yeah. So how did it's like...
There's only so much space, so a lot of time you have to, with Buzz and Dale, there's just this massive low-end thing happening. So there's almost no room for bass. So a lot of times I would just go, okay, this needs to be up in a place where there is nothing, and then it also just needs to somehow create more musical interest. And so that's what I try to do, is just expand the vocabulary and just the musicality of what was happening.
That really makes sense to me, because if you look at the Melvins discography, everything leading up to your involvement, it's all great and awesome, but it seems kind of within the guitar, bass, drums, vocals setup. And then there's Prick, and there's Stag, and there's Honky, and it's like all these kinds of other sounds are being thrown in the mix. So it's like what you said about bringing more of a musical vocabulary. It is certainly, I think, inarguably the weirdest era of the Melvins. Whether or not it's, the best is obviously subjective, but I don't think anybody can argue that stuff like Prick, and especially Honky, which to my understanding that was more or less the album that you were the most involved in terms of songwriting. So yeah, I don't know if I even had a question there, but all right. Well, I guess we could talk about about Honky. Was it just kind of like they were willing to take a back seat and let you drive a little bit more?
I don't know. I mean, because really, it's an interesting question. I mean, really, it's kind of up to somebody else to sort of get behind all of this, like pull apart all of this kind of stuff, because really there were all these different phases with me and them. We went through probably the hardest time of the Melvins' existence. I mean, one day this is going to be like a really ridiculous music history, the entire thing, when it's all said and done. I'm kind of losing my track here, thinking about it. But
that's all right.
I guess my point is that the era when I was actually playing with them and in the band had just this very sort of organic feel to it to me, up to a certain point, up until the very end, certainly through Honky, from the very beginning, from Prick to Honky. I mean, they kind of serve as sort of bookend, really appropriate bookends in a way. Or like they're the bread and the sandwich.
Right. Yeah.
And so, it almost feels like we were really one entity from the time that the era when I was playing with them feels like it was, to me anyway, and I think we just were, like we were operating intuitively as a single organism, if that makes any sense.
That's, it's listening to those albums, I don't think there's any doubt that there's a lot of cohesion in the band.
Absolutely. And there wasn't any, no, we're not going to do this, no, we're not going to do that. We just kind of collectively were all in on whatever was coming up. And, as far as like the weird tours that we did and also recording and writing stuff, we had a very, very seamless kind of way of getting stuff out and working on stuff, and it was almost that's the best way to put it, is it was just really intuitive. And the things, when we were even working on stuff together, like coming up with new stuff, it was very like, I don't think that's going to work. Anybody could say anything like that, and it wasn't any kind of, wait a minute, what do you mean that's not going to work?
We took it personal. Yeah.
It was just, we were just kind of operating on this sort of just a really efficient level that didn't involve getting emotional about stuff.
Right.
Which made it so we could be hyper productive and also at the same time do like really challenging amounts of touring and still kind of maintain this high efficiency. So I think Honky, just by the time that came about, along with the ending of the Atlantic situation, which was not, there's no like getting kicked off.
Right.
It's like, I've used the analogy before, you hire a plumber to do a job at your house, and then when the job is done, you don't kick the plumber off the job. It's like, okay, your contract runs like this, the contract ended, that's the end of it.
Right,
so you do something else. And so, it was pretty much an obvious thing to just do something for AMREP, and it was a kind of a strange time. There wasn't any it felt a little odd to me, just because there wasn't any sort of touring being planned around Honky. You'd have to do your own homework on whether or not we actually did any dates for that, but I don't think that we did. I remember, I think the last thing I did related to that was I went to Europe to do some like PR for Honky, and it just consisted of like 2 days of interviews.
Yeah, it didn't. I only really started listening to the Melvins around, I want to say, the time the Maggot and the Bootlicker came out. I was born in the mid '80s, so but even at that time, my understanding of Melvin's discography, I hadn't even heard of Honky until years later. I just think it was under promoted compared to like the big major label stuff.
Well, I mean, everything is under promoted compared to. I mean, you're only talking about like these are like monstrous multinational corporations.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like AMREP is like, it's like Tom Hazelmeyer in Minneapolis.
Right.
It's not. It's totally. So I mean, it got ads were put out. It was like, here's a new Melvins record, and that was it. You know what I mean? And there was a certain amount of, whatever. But as far as your question as to the material, was just I'd always, since I joined the band as a player, I'd always been throwing stuff at them, going, check this out. You want to work on this? You want to work on that? And they go, yeah, or no, or whatever. I mean, primarily it would be Buzz, who's the sort of arbiter of what gets done or what doesn't get done. But it is an interesting point that Prick and Honky have my biggest amounts of input of any of the stuff that we worked on at the time, and they're both kind of still the most radical Melvins records.
That's how I feel. I mean, they're cool. I think you said it best. If you're at a buffet, Prick and Honky are just food options at the buffet. If you don't want to eat them, don't eat them. They're not for everyone, but go ahead and try them if you're interested. So it's thinking of Melvins as kind of as a canon band. They're two really nice entries in the catalog.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about doing videos and talking about this stuff because I've talked about it in interviews and stuff. There's plenty of stuff that I've not said about all of this stuff. There's still, always probably will remain a lot of stuff I won't say. But, like Prick was, I was really surprised and delighted about the feedback about the Prick video because I just thought, well, I'm going to start with like the one that everybody, it's sort of one of the most contentious releases that probably nobody's listened to or cared about, and it was kind of cool to see the reaction about it. It was interesting for me to go back there and talk about it and, kind of put the record straight that it wasn't actually a joke record and wasn't even a record and was just purely the Melvins at their freest at that particular moment in time, just doing whatever we wanted to do.
Right.
So without any kind of, is anybody going to like this? It was just like, did we like it and did we fall around laughing about it? It's like that was all that was important.
Yeah, Prick was actually the whole impetus for this interview. I wanted to pretty much only talk about Prick at first, but just the more I read and watched about stuff, the more I felt like a more comprehensive interview would be better. You've described Prick as an adventure in musique concrète, and kind of an avant-garde kind of album. It's experimental, but you even said it's beyond experimental because it's just more just about having fun rather than making any kind of grand statement. It's kind of universally reviled to what I understand by critics and Melvins fans. But I was not really, I was not conscious of it when it came out. I'm curious what the reaction was when it came out, like in real time, because that's not, my understanding of it is just like reading old reviews online.
Yeah, I mean, I love the whole. It adds more hilarity to the whole thing, because it shows you how kind of emotionally and personally people take music,
Yeah.
And especially fans, they get so offended. It's like they're, it's like the band is their girlfriend or something. They did something untowards, and now we're going to have a conversation about
Yeah,
this.
you got cheated on.
Yeah, or just, I don't even know what it is. It's like, I told you not to wash my Slayer shirt with, whatever else. It's like, look at it now, yeah, I mean, it was universally reviled, and then, but it was just pure fun and creation, and never really meant to be anything more than that. I mean, it was one of those things, like I was telling you about, whatever we felt like doing, we just went and did it, and was just kind of didn't look in the rearview mirror about it, and I just love the stories about people demanding their money back and all those kinds of stuff.
In a way, it kind of precedes a lot of the music from the underground that I'm hearing that came out in the aughts, like in the 2000s, like the kind of nihilistic, just the cassette releases of a lot of these like basement bands. They kind of sound like Prick to me, and that became cool, and some of the bigger artists from that scene, like Black Dice or Wolf Eyes, or like the first Lightning Bolt album, kind of it's just so intentionally abrasive, but people were stoked on it. I feel like if Prick came out in that time era, people wouldn't blink an eye.
Yeah, I mean, and primarily, once again, I think it was just fans, and they were just, every step of the way with a lot of bands, a section of the fandom is going to become incensed about whatever they do, I mean, I remember there were people who were, when the Melvins put out Gluey Porch Treatments, they were like, "That's it, they've sold out." It's, they made a record in a real recording studio, and and money was spent on it, and this is stupid. All their punk rock credibility has gone out the window or whatever, And then the same thing. It's like every single record, there's something that a group of people don't like. It's interesting to me how kind of, now there's this, it's a minute thing, but people are like, I bought Prick when it came out, and I thought it was really cool. It's like, no, you didn't. But, I mean, I just love all that kind of stuff, and it's silly, and it's not anything world-changing. It's just a record by a band, and it, has its place, as you say, or like I say it also. It's the best Prick record it can be.
Yeah.
And, I don't know. I mean, we had fun doing it. At the time, I remember kind of going, it's kind of a Peria Ubu feel to me about what we were doing, and this isn't a bad thing. I love that band.
Yeah, it's a lot more musical than I think people give it credit for. People, it's just noise or it's just nonsense. And I'm like, most of the tracks actually have just like beats and rhythms, and like there are some more spacey like field recording type songs, but I was pleasantly surprised I just bought the CD at Philadelphia Record Exchange, which I'll shout out, one of my favorite record stores in Philly, and played it in my car, and I was like, this is like pretty musical. I don't know how else to say it. It's like there's plenty of actual music on it.
Weirdly, if I would have managed to graduate from CalArts and kind of presented something Prick-like as my sort of senior composition thing, they probably would have been like, this is great, this is groundbreaking.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. We can only hope to look forward to like a special edition where like every single song is on a collectible 7-inch.
Oh, don't tempt me. I will not have any money for food if something like that came out. You mentioned touring extensively during your time with the Melvins. I've read a little bit of a few stories about touring with some of these big name artists, 9 Inch Nails, Rush, White Zombie. So my question is, who was the biggest dick that you toured with, and who had the worst fans?
I do actually have videos about this stuff too.
Oh, see, I didn't have enough time to really delve into that.
Yeah, that's cool. There's a ton of stuff up there, but I have spoken about the bigger tours. I haven't done one about Kiss yet, but I think the next one I do about the big Melvins tour is going to be Kiss. It'll be the last one, but really, the eternal bugaboo that pops up is Rob Zombie.
Okay.
But I can't say that I actually knew that he was a dick personally. Because, and we can't really say that, it's just kind of one of those things where, well, if you're the boss of the organization and the organization acts like dick, then
right.
It's your responsibility. It's like when the CEO of Boeing has to go to the Senate, right, and explain himself, So,
is there any story in particular about touring with White Zombie?
Just they had a guy who was their head of security that was just abysmal as a person.
Okay.
Because you figure these are situations where everybody wants to be doing this, right? Like, if I could have my dream job, what would it be? Just, be on a tour bus forever and have lots of fun and be hanging out with cool people,
Yeah.
Who want to all be doing that for their life's career also. But some people, their position gets institutionalized within them, internalized, like in the military. So this guy just thought he was like a head cop type person.
Ugh.
And just kind of ran around going, you need to obey the rules, and you need to do this, you need to do that. And
I think he was threatened by y'all's coolness.
Yeah, well, he was, he was threatened by our utter disrespect for, any kind of authority figure.
Right.
Typically in those situations, everybody is, quote, cool, and nobody wants to come off like an authority figure because then you won't be cool.
Right, yeah.
So it's like, pick the guy who's the asshole, it's that guy. Everybody knows it,
So what was like?
Yeah, I would suggest that you watch the video put on White Zombie, but just for, it'll be. I tell it funnier there, and you'll get some surprises. If I tell you now, it'll be spoilers. Anyway.
Which fans gave you like the worst reaction? Because I've also heard some stories about some pretty angry fans of bands that you opened for during your set.
Yeah, once I mean, the Nine Inch Nail, one particular Nine Inch Nails show in Dallas was really dangerous and unfortunate and unenjoyable.
Oh.
And people just ripped the floor up. It was a minor league hockey venue, and so they had ice, and then they put this kind of, chipboard over the ice and had a standing room.
Wow.
And, they just ripped the floor up and threw it at us.
Oh my God! Wow.
I did a video about that.
Okay.
So that was actually kind of frightening. And but other times, like on a personal level, sometimes fans would kind of have the temerity to approach you personally and say how disappointed they were about this or that. We did a tour with Helmet once, and various things kind of went on in that tour to make us become somewhat incensed and just not even caring about the tour, to the point where basically we were inviting people up on the stage to play songs with us. We'd be doing 20 questions with the crowd, and, all just like turning it into some kind of weird sort of interactive, event more than just a straight gig.
Right.
And this got more and more kind of intense until, I'm trying to remember where the show was, but there was eventually a show where we ended up playing like 4 songs, and the rest of it was just this interactive crowd thing, And of course, all musicians are frustrated comedians, so that's where we went to. And then at the end, I remember like leaving one of those gigs. It was someplace in the Northeast. It might have even been Philadelphia or Providence.
Oh, it wouldn't surprise me if it was Philly.
Some guy came up to me and he was like, "Hey man," he was a little tipsy but not unmanageable. "Hey man, I just want to let you know that was, I traveled, blah blah blah, and like 2 hours to get there with a couple of people, and they hated the show, and I just have to let you know, man, I thought that was, just the worst thing ever, and I want my money back." And I was going, "Well, you're going to have to go to the box office," or I don't know. We got in this conversation about him getting his money back, and he was like, "No, man, this really bummed me out." And I was like, "Okay, well, here's $20. How about that?"
Oh, that's nice of you.
Get out of here. Like, I still have to go drive 150 miles before I can go to sleep. Or something. So, anyway, that's just, stuff like that was going on. It was actually, when I think about the 90s now, I mean, there was a lot of contentious crap going on at some of the shows we played. People were aggro for whatever reason, and they brought that to the gigs. So I mean, just gigs that were our gigs were different things.
Where you headlined, do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, people then were just like, the weirder it was, the happier.
Right.
I think I even tried to convince the guy that we saw a really special show and that we didn't do this all the time. Well,
that's what I think. Like, if you had such an emotional reaction from the set, you're going to remember it. So even if you didn't like it, that's the kind of stuff that like marinates with me, and I have to like digest it. I have to make sense of it, and then so it's kind of a powerful experience, even if it wasn't enjoyable per se.
Yeah, I mean, and then also it really is just rock and roll.
Right.
That's all it is. It's a band on a stage. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah, it's an opening band. You go see a band, and the opening band, they might suck, they might be cool, but you're not paying to see the opening band, so who cares? I
mean, I'll admit that there was plenty of times where we got into it with the crowd.
Yeah.
And you can make a decision whether to do that or not, and it's kind of like somebody having a really emotional reaction in front of you on a personal level, and you kind of have to count to 10 in your mind and decide if you want to go there or not.
Right.
We've had plenty of nights where we either went there or we didn't, and if we did go there, I'll admit bad behavior sometimes.
Oh, any details?
But I mean, our worst behavior is going to be what? Saying something mean in the microphone or making a big loud noise. It's not. You know, we're like start throwing amp heads at people.
Yeah, that might get you in actual trouble.
Yeah, I mean, throwing a microphone at somebody will get you and the person into, you know, it's not. That's where professionalism comes in.
Right. So continuing along with touring, you played with Nirvana on May 1st, 1994, which turned out to be their last gig, Kurt Cobain's last gig in Munich, Germany. Gotta ask, I'm a huge Nirvana fan. What was your relationship with Kurt Cobain like?
My personal relationship was just, hi, how are you today?
Okay.
You know, just sort of repeatedly on some level. I mean, really, by the time I came into the picture, he was really, the first look I got at him was very sort of personally resonant, because, I mean, I've suffered from depression for the majority of my life, clinical depression. And getting a look at him was like, I know what that is.
Right, okay.
And so, you know, but I mean, that was like the end of a line, you know, with depression. I mean, you kind of get there, it's like addiction. You get to a point where there's a fork in the road.
Yeah.
And you're either going to go down one or go down the other. And he went down the other, but when we were playing those big shows with him, I think it was in utero or incesticide or what was, I'm not sure what was being promoted.
Probably in utero if it was 94.
There was we did a couple of weeks with them in the U.S. too, and then we did some stuff in Europe with them. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of like a bunch of people going. Actually, weirdly reminds me of Biden, what's happening with Biden. But a bunch of people going, no, this is going to be great, and then you have like this profound, like the veil's been lifted, and it's like, here's how this actually is, and then there's magical thinking going, you know.
So that
was what was happening with him. You know, there was a bunch of people going, well, he's going to take a break, and then we're just going to start touring again, and it's going to be fine.
Okay,
you know?
But
there was.
Go ahead.
And then there was just other people who was, I mean, me and Buzz and Dale were going, yeah, we know what this is. You know, especially Buzz and Dale, because they've known him longer. But, you know, their management and, you know, people, maybe even guys in the band to an extent, you know, possibly having some little bit of magical thinking going on about where it was going to go, what it was going to do. But, yeah, it was sad more than anything else, you know.
How were the Nirvana's performances towards the end there? Was he able to kind of resurrect some energy for the shows, or did that depression kind of bleed through in the performances?
Well, I mean, I think they're always very sporadic as a live thing.
Okay.
Yeah. I think they were either on or they were off. I mean, kind of like Led Zeppelin, you know what I mean? It's like when they were on, it was like, oh my God, it's Led Zeppelin, you know.
Right.
When Nirvana was on, you know, out of all of the shows, I didn't play that many shows, Melvins, with me and the band play that many shows with them. And probably, you know, out of all of them, maybe 15% were like, wow, you know. Or there'd be certain things in the set that would be really great, and the rest of it would be sort of lackluster. You know. And then, you know, they didn't really tour. The timing was all off, you know, because they didn't tour for Nevermind.
Yeah, I read that.
Because they were just, you know, they were basically, Kurt didn't want to be a rock star.
Right.
So they didn't do that. That was like their big moment when they could have just been, they could have cashed in and cashed out. I mean, they cashed out no matter what. But as far as, so when we were playing these bigger places with them in the U.S., they were like half filled, you know, because their moment was gone, sort of. But I mean, they could have done, barring the demons that were running around within the psyches, they could have done extremely well just playing like mid-sized theaters forever, you know.
Right.
So, but yeah, it was sad and going to be over. I mean, it just looked like it was, you know, and it was. In fact, it was like, I'm done. This is done. The last gig.
Yeah. I'm curious now. I gotta find audio of that somewhere. It's just kind of a historical document for me. If I could get the whole show, including the Melvins performance. Yeah, side note there.
There's actually a video of that Munich show.
Oh, is there video somewhere?
I was asking you.
Oh no, I don't know. I'm probably gonna you know, dig through the internet somewhere. You know,
I don't think that there is, but I mean, I have my memory is, I'm cursed with kind of a really good memory, but I do remember the like that whole last entire day, basically. And, you know, kind of the sound check was where the thing was like, you know, this is fucked up, and I'm done with this thing.
Oh, wow.
We're like waiting around. It's regular course of the show thing, and then it kind of veers off in this other direction with a bunch of people going, oh, it's like that. Okay, you know, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, who knows, but it was that way. That was actually the end. So
yeah, I just made a Nirvana mixtape for my nephew. He's 9, so
cool.
Yeah, I looked through all the lyrics on Genius.com, and I found all the songs with clean lyrics and ones that had to do with being in school, of which there's like a few of them. So yeah, Arthur, that's coming your way eventually. I kind of want to like decorate it a little bit, cut up some old liner notes and paste it to the tape. But yeah, I could talk about Nirvana forever, but we might as well move on here. So the legend has it is that you were in the middle of recording your first solo album when Buzz called you up and let you go from the band. I am curious if you could shed any light as to why. It seems like nothing was broke, why fix it kind of situation.
Well, it's not legend, it's what actually happened.
Yeah, right.
Maybe it is, I don't know, isn't there like some John Ford line about, you know, the reality isn't good enough, print a legend or something? I can't remember. It's like a good John Ford quote about something to do with the legend, with the man who shot Liberty Valance. Anyway, yeah, that actually happened. And I started to, that happened.
Right.
we had some downtime before we'd start touring. Like we'd either do summer stuff in Europe or stuff in the fall, and we'd start talking about it early in the year. And talking to them, I said, well, since we don't have anything on the books, I'm thinking about recording a solo record, so I just wanted to run it by you guys and make sure we don't have anything happening. Nope, there's nothing happening, you know. And so typically when we were apart, I was living in London at the time, we wouldn't talk to each other much. It was just like our downtime was really downtime, and we needed it.
Mm-hmm.
But so I went, okay, well, it looks like I just started putting that whole thing together. And was going, yeah, I'm going to do it in LA. And so if you guys we want to play some gigs or something or work on some material, let me know. Didn't get any replies or anything. Yeah, okay. It was just like that.
Okay.
And there would be Buzz I was talking to. And didn't hear anything, so I was like, okay, nothing's going to be planned. And went to LA, started working on my record, made phone calls to Buzz and Daryl. Was like, yeah, I'm in town. Let me know what you guys want to do. If you want to do something, I'll be here for a couple of weeks. No replies from them, which I thought was kind of weird.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, well, maybe they're busy. Didn't think anything of it. And then a friend of mine in LA and said, oh, hey, cool, you're going to be playing at the Palladium. And there was like some gigs announced with Tool. And I was like, what?
Huh?
You know, I didn't hear anything about that. And he's like, yeah, he had like the LA Weekly or whatever. And he was reading out these Melvins dates with Tool. And I went, I don't know anything about that. And he goes, well, that's kind of weird, whatever.
Right.
So I called them up and didn't get them on the phone and left messages for them and said, hey, let me know about this stuff. I think the gigs were like a few months away. We'll need to make plans, et cetera, et cetera. Didn't hear back from them. This went on for a while. And I was just kind of like, okay, now this is really weird. There's gigs booked and they're not talking to me. And I finally managed to get Dale on the phone, and he was going, yeah, I don't know what's going on with that. And I'm in New Orleans with my band playing or whatever. His band, Altamont, I think.
Okay.
Something like that. And so I never did hear back from Buzz. And the next time I heard back from him was when he called me up and was like, yeah, we're moving in a different direction. And I just kind of went, I was actually mixing my record. I was sitting next to Joe Barisi. And I had left messages saying where I was, the numbers and stuff. This was before cell phones. And he was like, yeah, it's not working out.
What?
That was one of the things he said. This isn't working out, so we need to move in a different direction. And I go, and what is that? He's like, yeah, we're gonna start playing with somebody else. And it was like a really short, like 3-minute phone call with that exact stuff in it.
Huh. So there wasn't any...
It was just, all right. Well, I mean, I'm basically being told what's happening. There wasn't a dialogue or anything, or let's talk about this thing there. It was just like, click. All right, and I just had to get back to work doing what I was doing.
They never gave you any more explanation other than we're just going in another direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think like about 6 months later, I got a letter from Buzz, like a big thick letter. And by that time, I'd already gotten a job. Basically was like, okay, now I have no income, so I had to go get a job. And so about 6 months later or so, I came back from work, and it was like a big thick letter from Buzz waiting for me. And I was just really incensed. I'd had a pretty terrible day at work, and I was like, I just took it outside and put it back in the public mail box.
Oh, you didn't even open it?
Nope. I was just like so incensed, and
right.
Like, man, dude. And also, I mean, bear in mind, it's like I've been working with them since 1986.
Right.
Yeah, so, and like I mentioned earlier, I've gone through like really, really tough times with them, where like they were almost going to break up and stuff before I was even in the band. But I was just incensed, and of course now I have regrets that I didn't, see what he had to say about it. But I was just like, I don't even. Really, you're going to write me a letter after 6 months,
Right.
Like everything that we've gone through. So, but I don't harbor any ill will, or, I went through a really tough time of just trying to figure everything out. But I did know Buzz well enough to know that he made fairly impulsive decisions sometimes.
Yeah.
So I put this down to one of those, and, was not particularly communicative at that time about, talking about emotionally sensitive things,
Yeah.
So it was just like he got to a point where he felt like he couldn't talk to me about whatever it was, or was so fearful of what my reaction might be about things, because, I would definitely, and I am older, too, so I'm a little bit more, I don't know what the word is, this might, there's not really a way to say this other than, I'm not necessarily fearful about discussing difficult things.
Right.
A lot of difficult things, and maybe he just hadn't quite reached that, point in whatever his adulthood to be able to, I think the most concise way for me to say it is it was probably like impulsive and fear-based.
Yeah. It's kind of...
But I still don't know the actual reasons, other than maybe he just wanted to shake things up,
Right.
Literally go in a different direction. And that's valid. I mean, it's his band. He's the boss of it,
The next bassist, I think, was Kevin Rutmanis?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, yeah, he's no slouch. I mean, those records are pretty great, too. And definitely brings a different style to the band. I just wish it wasn't such a passive way of letting you go. It seems to be like a classic rock and roll firing move to just kind of ghost somebody or be non-confrontational about firing someone.
He just had to do what he had to do.
Yeah.
And it wasn't it made me realize that, well, it wasn't really I used to think of it somewhat as like a really pretty pure democracy. But I'd seen, it just made me realize that, it's his band, he can do what he wants.
Yeah. Well, I'm really happy that you don't have ill will. It's good to hear.
Yeah, it's taken a while to recover from that, and even kind of go like, well, really, this whole thing is more about the fans than anything else, and the people that genuinely love this thing, whatever that thing is. And so it's helped me to kind of, it's been therapeutic to make these videos about it and go, there was goodness in that, and creativity, and it affected a lot of people generationally, especially now that it's this long ago. But it took me a while to kind of start to see the value in it now that I have a lot of distance from it,
That makes sense. Time heals and gives you perspective.
Yeah, perspective is good, and so it's like, yeah, that was actually, we did some good work. It's about the best I can say about it. And it's been influential, so that's...
For sure, yeah.
And it doesn't sound dated, so that's good.
Yeah, not at all. I think your first solo album kind of echoes a lot of the variety that you hear, especially on albums like Stag or Honky. It's all over the place in the best possible sense. Especially songs like Coffin Maker's Complaint and A Shaky Rabbit. They're just like so goofy and silly. And then I came across, this is all last night, I went through your whole discography. The 20-minute song piece, Dick Cheney. So is that your longest solo recording? And what's the story there?
Yeah, I mean, it was just I went through this. I'd like to read just sort of prodigious amounts of history and stuff like that, And so I kind of went off on this tangent reading about Dick Cheney, who just seemed like sort of an interesting character to me, and I ended up reading a biography of him.
Oh, wow.
And it was super fascinating. This was a while ago. I think it might have been even during the second Bush Jr. Term. And then I ended up reading Dick Cheney's autobiography, and that was super interesting also. But anyway, I mean, he just seemed like this kind of, bands write songs about the devil, and he just seemed like such an inherently pure, malfeasant character.
Right.
And just the level of this sort of purity of intent was kind of staggering, really. He's a really unique character in American history, and his level of just insane patriotism goes so far beyond, it's maniacal, but at the same time it's calculated, and just there's genius at work there, but it's malfeasant genius.
Yeah.
So in a way, it was kind of super admirable, and I just saw him as like a metaphor for the United States, like espousing one thing and holding two contradictory ideas at once in your head that are utterly opposed to each other, like real schizophrenia operating on kind of a genius level, was sort of inspiring to me. So there's all this kind of weird hidden stuff within that track, and that's kind of the long and short of it. He was just an inspirational character, and then I took some sort of inspiration from Miles Davis on his record Get Up With Me. Has this song, Get Up With It. He has a song called He Loved Him Madly.
You said, what's it called?
The album's called Get Up With It.
Uh-huh.
And he's got a song that covers a whole side called He Loved Him Madly.
Oh, okay.
And it's, Duke Ellington sent him a Christmas card or something, a birthday card that said, I love you madly. And so that's where the song title comes from, but it's basically a song dedicated to Duke Ellington. So in my own perverse way, I thought, I'm going to do that too, but it's going to be a bit funny,
Yeah, it's kind of like a real punk meets avant-garde moment there. And have this long, ambitious song, and then just it's about this guy, this evil guy, and a lot of my memory, and I'm not like a political junkie, is taken up by the fact that he shot some guy while hunting. Did he include that in the autobiography?
Oh yeah, sure. But the great part about it is, have you seen that movie Vice? You know that movie?
No.
Oh, you should watch it. It's great. It's Christian Bale plays Dick Cheney.
That's he does not look like him.
It's the one. I mean, I can't believe he didn't win an Academy Award for it.
Really? Oh, okay.
One, you got to watch that movie. But anyway, it's the greatest part about Dick Cheney shooting the guy. Who's a friend of his. Is the guy apologized.
The guy apologized.
The guy who got shot. He was like, "Oh, I just feel so bad for Dick having to go through all of this."
This bad publicity. I'm sorry my body was in the way of your rifle.
Yeah, it's really good. But that's in the movie too. But you should watch it because it's entertaining. I think it's David Gordon Green who did like the Eastbound and Down show.
Oh, okay. That's another one that I know about that I haven't seen.
Well, more stuff you need to watch.
Just a few more questions if you don't mind, and again, feel free to let me go. You played with Sun or Sun O. I'm never really sure how to pronounce it, but live in 2006, they're kind of de facto one of my favorite bands because I listen to them going to sleep a lot. So I hear them a lot. Especially Grim Road demos, it's very kind of soothing to my ear. Reminds me of napping while my mom would use like the washing machine and dryer. I would sleep in the basement to that. Anyway, you described the playing with Sun O as the most fun I ever had on tour. And you said there was some stuff that went on that was seriously epic and unbelievable that has to remain secret. So I was wondering, 18 years later, if you could reveal just one of these secrets.
It's like a really good, chewy secret,
Okay.
They're still laughed about, but I mean, they've metamorphosed, you know what I mean? They've kind of gone from being, like on the day, it was just like, oh my God, and then it's like, we will never speak of this, and then I'm trying to figure out which one.
Okay.
Well, there was one that was really, I guess I'm going to say this just doesn't, well, Earth was on a tour in Europe in 2006.
Right, they toured together.
Yeah, and so we were all together, and there was a point where like one of the members of Earth had some medication they needed to get. And the medication was kept in a safe. This person was starting to feel really bad because they couldn't get their medication. It's not a member of Sun.
Yeah.
It's a member of Earth. And so they couldn't get the safe open because the safe had been closed in a weird way. There was like this screaming and shouting and jumping up and down. My bunk was right next to where this was happening, so I got enough. And I could see I was just sort of lodged trying to pull it open. And so I just said, okay, well, you can, let's just calm down, push the thing back down, and then it could be opened. And then it was opened, and then the medication that was taken was like twice the amount or whatever. And so as a result, the next time the bus stopped for fuel or whatever, person went into the bathroom and promptly fell asleep in the bathroom, and then the bus just left without him.
Oh my God.
And so then it gets to be like sound check time. It's like hours and hours later, like 4 or 5 hours later. It's to be sound check time. Oh, where's so and so? Oh, I don't know. I thought he was, on the bus. No, where is he? Nobody knew. So this person in Earth is just gone. Who knows where he is? They're just like, all right, nobody knows anything. There's no cell phone, nothing.
Did you?
And then,
happen to retrieve it?
A phone call comes in from like some nobody knows where, middle of nowhere in the Netherlands, and this person doesn't even know where they are and doesn't have any money, and a cab has to be sent out to retrieve this person and bring them back from wherever they are to the show, and they get back within about 10 minutes of show time.
Oh my God! Wow.
So that was one of the things that happened on this. It was one of the elements of this really, really insane day. But
I appreciate you spilling some tea there. I found 2 of the shows that you played on Sun's Bandcamp page. I think they have 2 Bandcamp pages, and one is dedicated to live recordings. And they have the personnel listed under every set. So yeah, I listened to a couple of your shows late last night. Really cool. It's definitely the Black One tour, because you got the guy shrieking Exaster. I don't know how to pronounce his name.
Exaster, yeah.
I love that stuff.
Yeah, Exaster, that was the first time Exaster had ever been out of the United States, so that was really fun. It's kind of like having a sock puppet that you could play all kinds of European tricks on,
All right, wrapping up. I know you're a vinyl-phile. I appreciated a quote you had. Our ears are analog, so like analog sound just sounds better, and that kind of makes the most sense to me. Why I also prefer vinyl records. I was just curious if you had a most prized record in your collection.
Oh God, I don't think I really do. I mean, I still have some records left over, like from when I was a teenager that I bought, and those have sentimental value, but I'm not a collector per se, like I'm not, I don't have to have like an RL pressing of Led Zeppelin 2 and, that kind of thing. I just have what I like. I will buy, newly remastered reissues from analog tapes of older stuff if they're done properly. I mean, that's some things that are, some records have never sounded better.
Right.
Like the Mo 5 Frank Sinatra releases, or like the Analog Productions Nat King Cole releases on 12-inch 45s, those kind of things. I just love the way those things sound. They're just recorded so nicely and so well. And I listen to a lot of classical music.
Nice.
And that stuff is just, of course, recorded amazingly well with just companies that didn't care how much money they had to spend to make it sound great. But I don't really have a prized record. That would be a really, really hard thing to decide on, because I like so many different kinds of music. And
that's fair.
But I am doing a thing on my I was starting to do a thing on my Patreon page where I was going to go through every record in my collection and put up samples from it and write an essay about it, and probably won't be able to finish that before I die.
That's
every record I start writing about, I'm just I tend to be fairly thorough about things, so it ends up taking a while to do it.
All right. Well, do you have anything on the horizon in store? Any projects, musical or otherwise?
I've got I have a couple of projects that I'm sort of trying to get off the ground, just as far as writing and making. One is a collection of solo guitar pieces.
Nice.
And the other one is a big electronic piece.
Oh, cool.
To be sort of hearkening back to my CalArts way of thinking. My minor was electronic music, and they had a great little electronic music lab there. It was like a custom-built Buchla system, analog Buchla system.
Nice.
And Spotnik was, is one of the foremost electronic music people to come out of that whole thing. His bigger electronic music pieces are interesting. So that's, thinking more about that has been inspiring to me, and I want to do kind of a long-form analog electronic music thing.
So moving in a more instrumental direction?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
I did really like your most recent album. It's the Bluebird. Is that what it's called?
What?
Yeah. It's like really. I like how it just takes its time. It almost like made me think of like desert metal, like Brant Bjork or something, but more grand on like a grander scale. I think that one stood out to me, and your first one, kind of.
I've always had sort of an inclination towards those kind of longer, more epic kind of things. I mean, really I've said this before, but one of my big early influences was Robin Trower.
Okay.
Really even more than Jimi Hendrix. I mean, I love Jimi Hendrix, but I was never able to see him.
Right.
But I did get to see Robin Trower very early on, maybe in like 1973 or something. And just the sound of his band, it would have been like on the Bridge of Sighs tour.
That's, I think, the only song I know by him. So this is like a solid rec for me to check him out.
Yeah, so the sound of that to me was like, oh, this is great. So all of my longer songs have just been a hopeless attempt in duplicating what Robin Trower does.
So this is shamelessly dorky question on my part, and it's the last question. So I would say it's like a bonus track type question. I am a huge Survivor fan, the show Survivor, and you played on Jeff Probst's show on the channel FX. It was in what he said it was your national TV debut. So I got to know what your impression of Jeff Probst was, because watching the whole segment is delightfully awkward. I mean, you guys rocked. Your performance was great, but the segment where he's talking to you guys everybody listens to this. They've got to watch that. So what was your impression of the now host of the 46th season running show Survivor?
So. Let me get this straight. The guy, this is like an MTV thing?
I think the channel was FX.
Okay, so is it the one where, so did this guy, this host of this show, end up on the show Survivor?
He's now the host. He's hosted that show.
God.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
My wife loved that show.
No way. Yeah,
I never realized that was a guy.
This is pre Survivor fame. Jeff Probst. He's got a mullet, and I just had to ask.
That's weird. I'm gonna have to tell her that. She's gonna love that. I think it was probably one of these things where. Like we would go when we would do PR, the Atlantic people would basically go. We would go to New York or in LA for like 3 days. We would do nothing but PR, right? So it would just be like from 1 hour to the next, stuff would be scheduled. And so that was just, I think, something that got scheduled at the end of the day, and I really have a very vague memory of it. I
Right.
mean, I have watched the clip, and the awkwardness is great. And isn't there like a guy that's like a beach caricaturist, like drawing pictures?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I have almost zero recollection of him, but what I do remember is meeting. I think it was either John or Andy Taylor from Duran Duran were on there also.
Yeah, they say that at the beginning of the clip that Duran Duran was on the show.
So I remember meeting those guys and just going like, I like your music. And they just started laughing. And I couldn't really understand why they were laughing. And they were going, wait, you were in Melvins, right? You know.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah. They didn't know anything about Melvins, of course. They were probably, we were just interfacing in like PR junkets.
Right.
They'd probably done 15 other things that day or whatever, but the main thing I remember coming away from that was I should have gotten John Taylor's phone number.
Aw. I do like Duran Duran.
You know, so that's just like another total other trajectory, you know, where it would have been like, so what's Duran Duran doing? And can I come to your recording?
Right, you guys could have collaborated.
Or just have, or at least have some kind of, start some, I don't know, personal relationship, doing something, I don't know.
Yeah.
But when you're on that level, those are the kind of things that pop up, you know, you're like, oh, here's whoever, and you either take advantage of the interaction or you don't, you know, and there's plenty that I wish I would have kind of been more assertive about.
Right.
You know, possibly could change, you know, whatever.
It was just like a whole whirlwind of experiences that, you know.
Exactly. You know, exactly. And so it's just that and I've never been a kind of person who's wanted to sort of be assertive and shove myself to the front so that, you know, possibly work to my disadvantage at points. You know, so.
Well, that's all I have. If there's anything else you'd like to share, by all means.
I don't really have any